Morning.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had an okay experience at the hotel. I know hotels are, you take your chances. I hope the beds are all right and the pillow was okay and it wasn't too hot and blah, blah, blah. So I hope you've had more than about 4 hours of sleep and are ready to go again this morning. I've heard numerous complaints already about the Austin traffic, which kind of amuses me because it's really not that far to the coordinating board. And if the traffic between your hotel and here has gotten on your nerves, then you are really an Austin beginner, I reckon. So I appreciate you all coming back this morning. Just some business. Of course, there's coffee and donuts and water over there. Help yourself. There's the break room is at the end of the hall to the right. Don't forget to turn your microphone on when you're speaking so that the people on the web can hear you, even if people in the room can hear you just fine. Don't forget the microphone. If there's no other initial business, then I'll turn it over to our chairs to convene the meeting and get started.
Good morning, everyone. I'll call us to order this morning for our second day of discussion about the field of study. Thank you for submitting what you did yesterday evening, the homework assignment that you had to be able to submit your potential roster of courses. And I wanted to talk about two things. You've been given two handouts this morning. One is the outcome of that vote, where everybody stood when it comes to so remember that we're 24, although there are a few people who are, a couple who are not here who weren't able to vote, and or may have submitted their votes electronically. I'm not sure if they're reflected in this or not. And then we also have a document that you've been given for the community college prerequisite flowchart for biology, and that was a question about the tuning document that precedes what we're doing. And so I think what we can do before we kind of dive into our votes, if Gary doesn't mind, I think he was going to explain it to us this morning.
Yes, Gary Tomlin's going to speak to us a bit about the tuning process, which we haven't talked much about, which was I'll let Gary explain what that is, but it's also a guideline for a set of lower division courses in biology that we're guaranteed to transfer. So Gary, you want to elaborate?
Well, the tuning projects were grant funded. It did engineering, biology, and I think a couple other disciplines a few years ago. And they were basically just created alignment pathways is perhaps the best way to describe them. And then they were optional or voluntary. They just tried to do some of this work in the spirit of cooperation, I guess is perhaps the best way to describe it. The field of study statute actually was put on the books back in '99, I believe it was, and that's when the first field of study work began initially back 2000, 2001, somewhere in that ballpark. And about 10 of them were developed, and then they were just kind of put on a shelf. The difference between the field of study work / statute and the tuning compacts is the field of study is statutorily mandated. It means that if a student completes these courses, they transfer. You got to do something with them. As we discussed yesterday, it doesn't really say you got to transfer biology 1301 for biology 1301. It says if there's this block of hours here, you transfer it over there. And I think we discussed that enough yesterday that we're all good exactly on the language. So the field of study initiative is really and truly our priority from the coordinating board. We talked about that. But as a sidebar, I talked to Alan briefly this morning, and one of the things that I think we need to discuss is what do we do with those tuning documents moving forward to make sure we clarify and eliminate any confusion as we do the field of study work. And I guess one other thing that's related to this conversation, and perhaps in the spirit of tuning, I talked to you yesterday about, sometimes these groups kind of talk about the lowest common denominator. And I talked about it's really the greatest common denominator. What's the real core block that is discipline specific as appropriate, and core courses as appropriate. But then in the spirit of tuning, you can still do more. Y'all had some of this conversation yesterday about genetics and some of these other courses and that kind of stuff. Well, again, making up a number, if this group comes up with 21 hours, but then Collin College and the University of Texas at Dallas also agree to do this other 3-hour course, you can do more through local articulation agreements, but then the field of study still applies. You can't do a local articulation agreement with less than the field of study, okay? Because, and of course, as much as anything else, the value of the field of study is it's a levels the playing field at the state level. Because even if a student is working under a local articulation agreement and that's their plan, and then all of a sudden life happens and they have to move from West Texas to Houston or Houston to Dallas-Fort Worth or wherever, that local articulation agreement really isn't in play anymore. And so the field of study applies. And so that's kind of the difference. And then there might be a few other nuances, but any questions on any of that, y'all? Thanks.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So I think that helps to guide us to say this is where, where ours is coming in. But I also like to mention, to talk about that we may still have more being done with the local articulation agreement, which we may find at our particular institutions might be the way we go in some things. So with that, let's turn to our list of courses, and let's start just to sort of lay out where we are, have common ground, and where we might have some more additional discussion. So the top 2 vote getters were, of course, the 2 biology courses. So we would add to the field of study. I guess what I'm asking is to add to the field of study biology 1406, or the option of the lab, separate lab and lecture. But fundamentally, we'd want those 4 credits of 1406 and 1407 added to the field of study. Do we have? I guess I'd like to do this just by a hands vote, if that's okay. Can we see all those in favor of adding those to the biology field of study? Okay, pretty universal, I think. So is there any discussion about those 2, or can we go ahead and proceed to the next one? Do you have a question, or?
Well, is it my understanding that we can't have an or?
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, 1407, if we're doing the 60 by 30 and working towards workforce skills, 1407 isn't moving in that direction the way that the learning objectives are currently written and it's being taught. And so I would argue that maybe 1414 would be a better choice if part of our mandate is the 60 by 30.
And your 1414 is the biotech?
The intro to biotech.
Okay. Would anybody like to have a conversation about that? Or we have at least voted to save 1406, 1407, unless there's an addition. We can't do an or, so it'd have to be an add.
Gary, good. I was hoping you'd add to that. Is it all right if we give institutions the option of either taking the 4-hour unified course or the 3-hour plus 1 lab?
Yeah, those are fine. Those are the straightforward, because that's in ACGM now. You take the, 1101 and not 01, I did the generic number, but it would be for that course, it would be 1306. And then the lab version is 1106, I guess. I really don't know. Or the 4-hour course is 1406. And so those are the same thing, effectively the same thing. Some of the smaller schools obviously teach it as one thing. The larger schools split it and have a little extra lab piece. And then on ORs, you can have ORs if they're appropriate and you agree. But that means they've got to be, you take them either way. Probably the best example of an OR is those 2 speech courses. And they're the ones that have business communications in the title, more or less. And in almost every catalog, there's actually 3 speech courses, but I think 2 of them are considered to be more business communication courses. And I don't remember the numbers of them off the top of my head, but if you're willing to say, we'll take this one or that one, you know, we just really kind of want you to have a speech course, you can do something like that. But the point is, you're happy with it. And it's not so much that you're happy with it, but you agree this prepares the students foundationally. And so to the point of the intro to, what was the course?
Biotech.
Biotech. If 1406 or Intro to Biotech works equally for everybody, y'all can do that.
Sure. Uma, and then I'm going to call a vote. Go ahead.
If 1407, the way I understand it, is basically a different systems course, right? But your biotech is very different. So I don't see how we can replace 1407 with the biotech, or even use it equally in terms of a FOSS substitute, all right? Because I think that we're going to shortchange the student at that point,
Okay.
all right?
Let me ask for a vote then. Is anybody would like to would vote in favor of making that an option of 1407 or biotechnology? Could I ask for hands who support that option? Okay, so I'm afraid that we'll have to just 3. I'm sorry, there were 3 in favor, and then those opposed, just for the record. Okay. Keep them up so that she can do a count. Today it really matters that we do numbers on our votes, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we have 1406 and 1407. If we proceed down the list, the next highest vote getter was general chemistry with lab 1. So can I have just again a show of hands who would like to see this added to the biology field of study? We'll have some discussion after, but show of hands would like to see it added? It's pretty much unanimous, I think. Okay. All right, so chemistry 1411 is then we are accepting that, or the option, the 3+1. Past this, we start to get with a little bit more variation. So let's go to the next, the following course on that, which is chemistry 2, chemistry 1412. So we'll have room for discussion, but by a show of hands, those in favor of adding this to the biology field of study? Okay, so again, we're unanimous on that one. So chemistry 1412 is on that list. All right, let's stay with chemistry and go to our next highest vote getter, chemistry 2423, organic chemistry with the lab. So let's start with the vote. I'm sorry, just chemistry 1, organic chemistry 1. All right, so let's start. All those in favor of adding that to the biology field of study? Okay, all those opposed? Percy? Go ahead.
I'm just looking, if you have the information available, the database I listed of how many universities and community colleges offer these courses. The courses you've talked about so far are no trouble. Chemistry, what did we just do? Chemistry 2423, right? That one is currently only offered at 4 universities. It's offered at a number of community colleges, 38 community colleges, which is about, it's about half the number that offer biology 1406. 64 colleges offer that one, but 38 offer organic chemistry, and again, only 4 universities. So I'm not saying it can't or shouldn't be in the field of study, but I just want you to be aware that universities are either offering that course at the upper division level or they're not offering at all.
Okay, so we'll start the discussion. Frederick?
Yeah, what are the numbers for the split version, 2323?
Good question. 2323. It's currently offered by 15 universities. Yeah. There you go. Right, and 18 colleges. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So we're still, any other discussion on that particular item, but I think I'm glad you raised that as a point. Okay, where we start to see departure, we're splitting in. We start to get into the low numbers. So shifting to a different, since we talked about biology, we talked about chemistry, physics 1401, so college physics with lab. So all of those in favor of adding that to the biology field of study, please raise your hand. And all those opposed?
That's a popular course. It's offered at 14 universities, 57 colleges.
Okay, so can we have just a quick discussion among those opposed, since we have slightly more opposed on that one than we have before?
The reason I went against it, we have a BA at our university, and the BA is designed to allow students to kind of tailor what they need to do in our particular region. So it's used for teachers. It's used for students who are thinking more in lines with something a little bit different than whatever track that we have. And so we don't require the physics. Now, they can take the physics if they want to, but we don't require it for the BA degree. And so we like to have that set up to where there's a lot more options for them to tailor it the way they want. And that's the reason why we do require organic chemistry 1, but not the physics.
Okay, any other discussion on the physics? Yeah, Warner.
Larry, just to follow up, do you require it for your BS applicants?
We require it for the BS, yes, we do require it. But before we left yesterday, it was mentioned we should be looking at both our BA and our BS. And when I did that and I talked it over with my senior faculty, it was concluded that the greatest common denominator was without the physics and just having it up to the organic chemistry 1.
Any other discussion of that physics option, Gary?
Well, it seems to me, I've heard this a couple of times, and I forget who else was bringing this up yesterday, that there seems to be an adjacency of teacher prep, teacher certification in play here, that people who are really working, you can't have an education degree in Texas by statute. And so people who want to be teachers, and I assume they're taking some science courses, and then the teacher certification courses, I guess, is what's happening. I understand the conversation, and I understand they're fitting into the program, but this is really and truly the biology field of study. And I wonder, and it's y'all's conversation, but Larry, you said you have the BA and then you have the BS.
Right.
And so in the BS, you want the university physics.
College physics, not university.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You want the physics course, so it seems like the students that were going down that pathway would fit, no problem for you. But then these biology teachers, are they really biology majors? I guess is almost my question. It almost seems like we're convoluting two conversations, or at least from my point of view.
I'll turn to Sandra because she's our resident expert on the teaching.
I'm really an expert in this field. I've been working with the teachers for a long number of years, and what you say is true. In the state of Texas, you don't get a degree in teaching, you get a degree in a content area, so you get a degree in biology or physics or chemistry or history or math or whatever, and then you take education courses and then take an exit exam. So our exit exam is aligned with the TEKS, which are what students must know and learn in the state of Texas. So this is mandated. It's not what we choose, it's what we do. And for the teacher certification program, we have numerous different certifications, but those that major in biology may get life science, which is teaching biology, nothing but biology, and they wouldn't have to have physics, but other certifications are composite science. Those students graduate and they may teach biology or physics or chemistry to our children. And the other one is 4-H science, and they're going to be teaching physics, chemistry, biology to middle school students. They also must have physics background. So of the biology certifications, 2 out of 3 absolutely must have physics. So if your teachers are not taking physics, you're doing a disservice to them. They would be weak in passing the test. Now, they could get the life science certification. It's true. Every child in the state of Texas has to take biology, so there's a high demand for that. But what would happen is these students would then get out into the field and would decide, now I think I'd like to do composite science or middle school science, and they could take a teacher certification exam without any further education and become certified to teach our children physics or physical science in middle school, having never had a physics course. So I would strongly state that we need to have physics in this core block so that all students, including our teachers, are exposed to physics. It's essential.
Can I ask just we'll go with Chris and then
Sandra, I think you said it.
I'm sorry.
You said it beautifully. Being in the education field as well, because I was a classroom teacher as well. I couldn't get a job without that composite degree, so I needed the physics in order to. They wouldn't even touch me with just an advanced degree, even in biology. So, and it really prepares you. We want the best teaching our students, so I think having physics in there is important. But if we wanted to look at a loophole, I think the Colorado transfer agreement that they sent us, condition number 8 says students seeking K through 12 teacher licensure may not use this agreement because teacher preparation programs have different requirements for educator licensure. So there's kind of precedence there in what Alan sent us earlier if we wanted to. I don't know if that's possible, but I would still agree with what you said earlier. I think it's important that we have physics there as well.
I'd like to give the time for the comment down here and here, and then I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll have follow-up. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with that we have to have physics, but I was looking at the most common denominator here for this. There are students who do not want to do physics. They want to just do the life sciences. Like you said, there's 2 out of 3 that require it. And so that's why I was going in that direction, and that's why we leave it open for them to tailor it the way they want. We do emphasize take the college physics. It'll be better for you in the long run. But I thought that this field of study was supposed to be a common denominator that can be transferred from community college to the university level. And that's why I went with this particular one, saying no on the college physics.
Okay, Amanda?
Physics has a math requirement. Does that mean if we're going to put Physics 1401 on the FOS, we also have to put the math requirement on the FOS?
It has 2 courses as math requirement, 13, 16, the trigonometry, and the 14, the college algebra. So that in case the student's going to spend a lot of time before they get to physics trying to pass these courses in order for them to get to physics.
Okay.
Keep that in mind.
Is there anyone else in a situation similar to with the BA that, those of us who have a BA program in biology, how many of us would have physics as part of that BA program? So, and how many do not? So it looks like there were 4 of us, and 1 does not. Okay, what I'm going to do with the physics, because we're going to have to look at what else we have in the field of study. But I think that the point is well taken. Did you have any follow-up on what that was mentioned earlier concerning the degree?
I was just going to point out that it's a slippery slope to say that we'll not include physics and leave it up to institution to decide whether or not our teachers should have it, because that's not preparing our teachers appropriately when we already know that most of them are going to be teaching physics in one form or fashion. I don't think it should be discretionary.
Okay. Catherine, and then Warner.
So the way I understand it is if we would require physics in the field of study, that doesn't mean every further institution would have to require it in terms of it was just that physics would have to transfer. And I think it's important enough that we want to tell the students that you really, for your best shot, is you need to have physics, and we will accept it if you transfer it. Now, an institution can say, yeah, you didn't have it, and that's okay, but I think, it really should be required that we encourage the students to take it, and we accept it if they take it and transfer it.
Okay. Warner.
That was basically my point, Catherine, is that we need to think of these classes in terms of their transferability, and that what we're really saying here is that if you take it at a community college, a university will accept it. You don't have to take it, but if you did, a university would accept it. And I think this is a class that's required by numerous people, both biology majors, people who are going into the health sciences, preparing for the MCAT, those students, as well. So I think that was a good point.
Okay, we have Jim.
Something to bear in mind also gets back to what Gary said earlier, which is students that have to relocate for any given reason too. This could affect them from one university to the other. So not just transferring up from a 2-year institution, but transferring between 4-year institutions.
Okay. What I think I'd like to do is, although we voted already, we've had a chance to hear different positions on this subject. So I'd like to take the vote again on the addition of Physics 1401 to the biology field of study. So all those in favor of adding the biology or the physics to the field of study? Okay. All those opposed? Okay. 3. Okay, well, we'll leave there for, based on the vote that we have as an outcome. Keep in mind that what will happen next after we're finished with our work is that it goes out for public comment. And so that will be an opportunity for these programs to talk about it a little bit more, and we'll get some feedback on that decision. But I feel that given this group of people that we voted twice now for addition to the field of study, and so I think we'll keep it there for right now, okay? Pending the feedback that we have. All right.
Ask a question, not being a physicist. Is the difference between Physicist 1401 college physics and Physics 2425 university physics, the difference between just a 100 and a 200 level course?
One is calculus based.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So university physics. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and typically, I mean, at most places, your university physics is being taken by your chem majors, your engineers, your physics majors. Oh, I see. Okay. Are we ready for our next biology course if we continue down the list? Our more contentious area of... So if we're keeping track, right now we have 4 credits, we have 24 credits within the biology field of study at the moment. We have 2 courses in biology, 3 courses in chemistry, and 1 course in general physics, or college physics, sorry. So we have 24. Now, we have been told that some of those can be counted as core. So if we took one as a life science and one as a physical science, and we reduce that back down, that brings us to, that actually puts us at 18. Well, if we don't, with the labs, it would be the 3 credits each of life and physical, right? So we would be at 18 with this number. Yeah. Now, we may choose to add something, but, sorry.
Well, I was going to make a suggestion, because you and I had a discussion at breakfast this morning about the options, and maybe where we're looking at these lower numbers, rather than going through all of them one by one, okay. Maybe discuss that up front and then see if that's maybe a more viable track.
Can we maybe start with math?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, we're changing things on the fly. I'd like to actually shift gears to talk about math really quickly, because we have a lot of votes for math, and I think the math votes were really split. And I was looking at that earlier, that we have some math for the calculus, we have some math for college algebra, we have some statistics, and so forth. Let me take a general vote, and then we'll drill down into something specific. So keeping in mind that we do have math as part of the core, okay? So I realize prefacing it that way would maybe bias your decision, but math is part of the core, but would we also like to have math as part of the biology field of study? Okay, because if we do add it to the biology field of study, we were looking at our credits, and we'd also be looking at what we're requiring. So let me ask, would we want to include math as part of the biology field of study? All those in favor of including it in the biology field of study, please raise your hands. Okay, all those opposed to adding math to the biology field of study? Okay, I'd like to just give a few moments for conversation on this before we move on. So those who want it to the biology field of study, can I ask for your thoughts on those? Yes, Catherine.
Biology is becoming more and more quantitative every single year, every single day. And to not acknowledge that is, and what I see is a lot of students initially start as biology majors because, well, they think they like science, but they don't like math, or they're not going to have to do any math. And I think by not including any sort of math in a field of study is we send to the students and parents and advisors even is that biology is not a quantitative science. And so students then get into it and realize they can't complete a degree or a certification or, you know, be useful in the field because they have no quantitative skills and they never wanted those quantitative skills. So I think having some math requirement, you know, is essential to show the students and parents that biology is in fact quantitative.
Okay. Any other comments, Warner? And then Debbie.
So I think if I'm understanding the process correctly, I don't think by not including math in the biology field of study that we're saying math is not necessary or needed for biology. I think if we include physics, which I think we have, as it was pointed out, you have a math requirement for that. So in a way, we were kind of sneaking math in there, so to speak, without designating it specifically as a biology field of study. Because I understand that there's a issue with how many credits, hours we can designate. And this might be a question for those on the board, but is there going to be a math field of study as well? Because if math as a discipline does something similar to what we're doing, then they may put a lot of these classes on there that will transfer and kind of allow those math classes taken by biologists to also be transferable.
Any other comments? We'll go with Sandra.
I absolutely agree with you. And one of the survival skills in college is math skills. But what I think we'd get into is discussion of which math. So is it going to be college algebra and trigonometry? Yes. Is it going to be statistics? Probably. Is it going to be calculus? Maybe. So we'd end up wanting to include all of those. I don't see how we could pick one and say that's the important one that we want or would transfer. And I think it sort of depends on the student and their focus as to how much of that they need. I'd like to include all of them, but I don't think that's possible. So I would say going with the idea of letting it be the prerequisite that determines you can't take this if you haven't had that. Maybe it's calculus, maybe it's not. Then I think we're still on safe ground with the students being solid in their math background.
You don't have to include prerequisites for courses in the field of study. So are any of these math courses prerequisites for the courses that you've already determined? Yes. Okay, so college algebra, is that the only one? So there's no need to consider those courses that are already baked into the courses you've already chosen for the field of study, if that helps.
So if we can, so the argument is that if we have implicit there are two math courses that are required for someone to go into college physics. I do kind of agree that our challenge is now going to be to figure out which math. And we may run into the BA and BS question as well with the math, I think, as we have with physics. But I don't want to. Anybody else would? Yeah, Percy.
And the math is also required for the 1406, 1407, and the chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's correct. I think Gary wanted to make a comment.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Gary.
Yeah, let me. I guess I'm trying to figure out if I want to use the word policy or philosophically, but math is in the degree because math is in the core. So I understand that, the conversation about it needs to be there. Well, it's part of the discipline, but even larger than that, you can't get a degree without having math. Then you get into the question of where I think you're going now is which math? And of course, you already have, apparently at a minimum, college algebra, if I understand from what you've said on the prerequisites for the courses. And so then the next question, I think, is apparently, or at least A&M, I think, requires calculus, and perhaps others do. I'm not real sure. Okay, so others do. So then you're kind of down to a college algebra / calculus question. And so policy, operationally, the 120-hour rule, that kind of stuff from here is that if you can be prepared out of high school to enter calculus, which you can, then that's been considered as not hidden prerequisites. And of course, engineering is probably the best example because I think we all know they start at calculus. From them there is no math but calculus. All that other stuff is just whatever it is, right? And so I think you're probably okay of not specifically naming college algebra, because if you name college algebra, I think you create challenges for other schools who have higher math, right? Because, it's got to be there. And I think it's named by default. It's named by omission, if you will, because of all the other things that I already enumerated. Does that make sense? And
I'd like to reiterate, too, that the not including the math in the field of study does not preclude programs at each individual institution from including their specific math requirements that are appropriate for their degree plans. So if you're in I'm working with my colleague here that's in wildlife biology. So if we're talking statistics, if we're if that's more appropriate for your field for your particular degree plans, then that allows you that flexibility to do so. Where college algebra or calculus and these other programs, it doesn't preclude you from doing that.
So I think we're capturing the common prereqs with college, or with the college physics. It is the algebra and the trig, to go back to the point made earlier. So algebra and trig, that would be within those two. Beyond that, then a student may have an individual requirement at the institution to which they transfer for the four-year degree, additional math requirements there, and that doesn't prevent them from having those additional math requirements. But this requiring college physics would ensure that they get a certain amount of math. And it also prevents us from having to identify which math. All right, let me get to the next one, and I'm going to do, so let me, just to finish, I'd like to take the vote again, just so we can say for certain where we are. So all those in favor of not adding math to the biology field of study, not adding math to the biology field of study, please raise your hands. Okay, all those opposed to that proposal? Opposed to not adding math. All those who would like to add math to the biology field of study. Sorry. So raise the hands again. I'm sorry, I don't think she got the count. It's two of you guys. Okay, thank you guys very much. The conversation is good, and these are all conversations we're taking back to our home institutions too. So, and we'll be answering from all those people who read the biology field of study and want to comment on it. I'd like to move next to another biology. So the question of, ask the general question as we did with math, okay? All those in favor of adding more biology to the biology field of study, if you would raise your hand. Adding biology beyond 1407, 1406 to the biology field of study. Is that clear? And yeah, all those opposed to adding more biology to the biology field of study. Did we have any abstentions on that one? I think I didn't see a couple hands. Oh, okay, thank you.
No wonder my math doesn't end up in 70.
This is why we need math and biology field of study.
Just testing you early in the morning, that's all.
I'll toss in the opinion of Sherry McCullough, who's monitoring from remote, who said that she believed that the field of study should be as minimal as possible and really just include biology 1406 and 1407, and everything else on top of that is gravy that could be done by the colleges. So I think she would probably say nothing more than those two courses.
Okay. So given that we've had the vote, I'd like those who would like it to be added, if you would let us know your thoughts.
At first glance, if you don't have a title on top of it, and you just look at the courses, do we have a biology field of study or a chemistry field of study? Since we have more chemistry classes than actual biology courses.
Okay. Go ahead, Murat.
I may add as well, I don't see any sophomore level of biology courses in this, field of study. It's like my colleague said that I understand transferability, but a lot of students may not choose to transfer, and if I want to give them a biology degree, it seems to be that, with the field of study, I'm only giving them the general ones. I understand they could really have them like maybe in the core or something like this, but as far as this is concerned, it's more tilted towards chemistry and not, kind of hardcore biology.
Here, and then I want to raise then we'll go with Andrea, and then I'll say something. Go ahead.
Is it okay if the opposition?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. The reason I'm opposed to having it up there is because many of the universities are serving regional needs. My university is serving regional needs in association with the medical center, with biotechnology and things like that. So I would rather have a more flexibility at that sophomore level to serve that regional need. And I'm sure other universities have different regional needs for those, and I assume that that's how they're thinking as well, to allow for that flexibility. And that's the reason why I'm against having a sophomore level biology in there.
Andrea.
So my feeling is that if we're wanting students to maintain a focus in biology, where they've taken a year worth of 1406 and 1407, and then they take a year off because there are no courses that transfer to a four-year university, then I feel like they're going to lose what they've learned in 1406 and 1407. So I feel like taking something like microbiology for science majors would be an example to use where, say, they took that as a sophomore level class, and that transfer into a four-year for a biology elective. It doesn't have to transfer in as the micro for, a junior or senior level class. But it needs to be, they have to be able to take something their sophomore year to keep them interested in biology.
Okay, Warner and then Catherine.
So, I voted against more biology, which is kind of hard for me being that I'm a biologist. But I'm trying to, think of our students. I think one of the main focuses for, this group and this committee is to make sure that our students can transfer to a university after, attending a community college as juniors ready to take those junior level, senior level science courses, specifically biology courses. The two courses that we have for our sophomore courses, the general microbiology that you mentioned, and genetics. Genetics, I don't know how many community colleges, offer genetics. It can be kind of difficult to offer, just with the amount of lab prep and work that you have to do. And I don't know how many universities accept those as transfer credits now. I would hate to see a situation where a student takes 24-21 at a community college level, really gets excited, transfers to a university, and then finds out they have to take micro again because that transferred just as some elective courses. As much as I love micro and I teach that course, I would just hate for a student to have to do that. Conversely, I think it would be more important to, have them focus a bit more on chemistry, especially organic chemistry, because that will prepare them for those junior and senior level biology classes that they'll take. Because my hope is that if a student gets a degree from a community college, they're on their way to a bachelor's degree. And I think having some more chemistry and maybe talking about physics 2 and whatnot would help better prepare them for that level.
Okay, Catherine, and then Bridget, and then who else? Okay.
So I voted against accepting more of the biology, but I agree with Andrea in that it would be nice if there was something to take at the sophomore level. But the problem I have with the courses, at least as they're listed here, is that there are no prerequisites for the genetics or, if I'm reading this right, the A&P, I guess it did make it down. But so they're not really sophomore level courses if there's no prerequisites. If there was a prerequisite, I would much prefer students to have, like with a micro, it could be a repeat of introductory stuff. And going deeper into it with a more focused on a particular application of it. But again, it's repeating the stuff, and that's what they need if they're going to succeed. When they come in, it is better that they not have a year off, but it has to be at the right level, and without prerequisites in some of these other courses, it's still more of the same, and so it's not at the right level. And that's where I've got the problem with accepting additional biology, is that it's, again, there's no prereqs to these other ones.
Okay, we'll go with Bridget and then Tiana.
Well, I think they do. Genetics and micro both have prereqs to them. At the very least, I think they're 1406, if not both 1406 and 1407.
We have a math prereq as well.
But I think to ask students to take a sophomore level class and then ask them to take that same sophomore level class as a junior instead of a different upper level class is not really fair. And it's very disingenuous on our part to ask them to do that. If we need to rewrite the learning outcomes, that we're making a better class for genetics or micro at the sophomore level, maybe we should do that. I think creating an independent study course that everyone agrees on what you should do in that independent study course could be an appropriate sophomore level course that everyone can take and transfer. But I think we really need to address the sophomore level class, because as Andrea says, you want to keep them in biology. This is biology field of study more than a chemistry field of study.
Tiana.
I was just going to add, at my institution for microbiology, we have the 2 majors biology courses and 2 majors chemistry courses as prereqs for the sophomore micro. And for the genetics, 1 biology and 1 chemistry. So we are putting those prerequisites in place. And I strongly agree with Bridget that we do need to address the SLOs and tailor these courses more for their intended use.
Okay, we'll go with over here and then to Uma.
Just looking at the ACGM, there is no prerequisites in here. So that's an issue. That's the reason why we're bringing it up as an issue is, yeah, it might be a prerequisite there, but we want to make sure that all community colleges make it a prerequisite, and that's where the problem lies for us at the university level.
Can I follow up in saying that would be another recommendation we would love to add those prerequisites. It would be universal.
One of the problems with the prereqs for some of these classes is if they're required in certification programs, so nursing, for instance. My understanding is that we can't have prerequisites for those courses, so that's why you don't see it on anatomy and physiology 1 and 2. You don't see it on microbiology because those are requirements in those programs. And I don't know if that varies from institution or not. I don't think so, but I know, speaking for my own institution, that's why we don't have it.
Okay, let me go with Uma and then Tiana and Mary after that.
Yeah, I have to say a few things. First is that in our institution, the Gen Chem, the 2 chemistries are actually a prerequisite to take the intro bio 1 and 2. And the way Collin College transfers Intro Bio 1 and 2 is their equivalent is 1406 and 1407. So our students take their Intro Bio, which is actually at the 2000 level, in the sophomore year. So that brings me to the question. So students don't have to transfer at the end of 2 years. Can they also transfer at the end of the first year?
Yeah.
So, which means that among these courses, we have to decide which they have to take first and which they have to take later. If we have 8 courses, so if they take their Gen Chems the first year, and then if they take their biology the second year, because I believe Gen Chem is really a prerequisite in our institution to take the bios. And that is extremely important because then that helps the students, those who are not just bio majors, but those who are biochemistry majors, and they need that. So I don't believe that there is going to be a gap of 1 year in terms of if we don't add extra courses. I think we have enough in terms of satisfying the requirements so that when they do transfer, irrespective of when they transfer, they're going to have a whole world of options open to them.
Okay. We'll go with Tiana and then Mary, and then I'd like to add something after that.
I was just responding to Jim. The nursing course is kind of off the table in this discussion. We don't have prerequisites for that micro or the A and P, but we're strictly talking about the majors courses.
But
where we have
we're
the
talking about
prerequisites.
biology 2421.
21, yes.
Correct, which is the,
For science majors.
correct, right. So
But
for
you're
us,
referring to the nursing one,
right, well,
2420.
which one is the nursing one?
2420.
Okay, so we offer the majors biology as for our nursing program, because it's the only micro that we offer. Got it.
Okay, Mary, and then.
That was going to be my follow-up, that, yeah, obviously 2420 is not an appropriate class for this field of study, but the ACGM for 2421 clearly lists Chem 1 and the sequence of biology 1406 and 1407 as prereqs for that course. So I'm not convinced that I want it in the field of study, but since the question came up about whether there were prerequisites or not, that class does have prerequisites that are already in our field of study.
Okay.
Yeah, Amanda pointed out that in the ACGM, the prereqs are noted with 2321, but they're not carried over into 2421. They're not actually shown there. Yeah.
So in looking at, when I had conversations with people after yesterday's meeting, we talked about maybe having an option for a sophomore level class. One of the challenges that we have is, as we're hearing, is that different institutions do different things differently. And we're running into a problem that we also, within the field of study, we can't have an either or option. The only thing we can have that with is really the 4 or the 3 credit. And so we're running into the problem that we would like to have a placeholder for a biology at the sophomore level, but we can't do that logistically within the field of study. And we're also hearing a lot of at my university. And so what we're finding is it's clear that each institution, that's where we start to part ways, right? And even within each program within that institution, that's where we start to part ways. And so finding that common denominator is going to be really difficult. So what this may speak to, or this probably speaks to, is that absence may speak to the need that's filled by that local articulation agreement, that when we see that pipeline from particular 2-year institution to 4-year institution, we may have to work harder on that local level because of the particularities of our institutions. So I'm wondering if we could find that being the case, whether we could, I agree that we have a lot of chemistry, and I understand why we have a lot of chemistry for biology, but at the same time, because we're having a hard time landing on a single course, and this is very different because it's not something that's also going to count. We've already covered the core when it comes to life and physical science, so now we're going into more beyond core science, and so we're going to run into challenges, and then at the end of the day, the student who goes from one place to the other may be poorly served by us determining for them and for their institutions what's going to transfer. So just to put those 2 points out there a little bit, but are there other follow-ups to that, to these comments we've had so far? Andrea, you had, or no?
When you say that some courses can cover the core requirements for life and physical science, just so I'm very clear, which are those courses? Would it be the 2 biologies?
I think it'd be the 2 you'd have 6 credits, right? You'd have a life physical, but yeah, you'd have the 2 biologies done in that case, that you'd have 6 credits. Or chemistry, yeah. But if we're talking biology FOS, we'd probably considering that. So that gives us 6 credits at least in the FOS 4 that are counting in core.
Physics also.
Physics also, yes. But ultimately it's 6, I think.
Okay.
All right, so let me call the vote again, because we've had our conversation as we did with math. So all those in favor of adding more biology to the biology field of study, please raise your hand. Or all those opposed? Okay. Any abstentions on that one? One abstention. Okay, so it looks like the decision is to not add more biology. Just to clean this full slate up, there were some additional chemistry and physics. So we talked about second semester of physics and second semester of organic chemistry. Are there any in favor? And I don't mean to bias this, but given that we're kind of at our limits of our credits, any in favor of adding more chemistry to the biology field of study? This would be organic too, potentially. More chemistry?
Asking for yes.
Yes votes for adding, yeah. Okay, all those opposed to adding more chemistry to the biology field of study?
Okay, can you raise your hand again? Okay.
Would we like to have any discussion about for those who are in favor of adding more? Sandra and then Warner.
My concern was with students that transfer in with 1 semester of physics or 1 semester of organic chemistry, and then being required by the degree plan to take that second semester at the 4-year institution. There could easily be a mismatch of what's taught in the first and second, knowing that they're learning objectives that are published and they're supposed to follow those. The rigor, the approach, I just think we could see students hitting that second semester at a 4-year institution and suddenly becoming failures. That could be a problem. If they had a continuous sequence in the community college from which they were coming, then it seems like it'd be a more seamless approach, and they'd get a full suite of those physics or those organic chemistry courses before they moved into the other institution.
Okay, Warner.
I agree with that as well. I have 2 concerns. The first being with student success, which Sandra had mentioned. The second being with transferability, especially with the organic chemistry. As we discussed yesterday, there's been some contention about, organic chemistry from the community college level being transferred to universities. I think this field of study designation kind of gives this an opportunity for this group to kind of address that transferability in, I think, a positive way for our students, in which, if I'm understanding the process, if we have both of these classes as a field of study designation, then both of them will transfer as organic chemistry. That being the case, most students who take OChem 1, well, they need to take OChem 2. And so I'm worried that if we say, well, OChem 1 will transfer, will OChem 2 not transfer then? Or if they take it at our university and or our community college and it's not an FOS, does the university say, well, that's great, we'll take your OChem 1, but we're not going to take your OChem 2. We would like you to retake that at our school. Are we setting that as a precedent? I don't know, but I think that's something worth discussing.
Okay. Here and then to Catherine.
So I think some of these things we're talking about for these individual courses in some ways are an advising issue, so that, if a student is transferring, and again, speaking from our institution, but I've run across this with other colleagues at other institutions, some of our transfers are going into programs where they're not required to have that organic 2 for some of those programs that they transfer into. I know some of our students that transfer into our local university, that's the case. Whereas there might be some students in that same cohort that are going on to a university that does require that second half of organic. And in that instance, I totally agree with I totally agree that sticking with an instructor through a series does lend itself to better completion rates, to better success. But I think if you're advising the students carefully at the institutional level, working with those students to determine, okay, where is it you're going, where are you going, where are you landing to, which is something we should be doing up front anyway, regardless of the field of study, that we can advise those students appropriately, offer those courses, and steer those students into that second half where it makes sense to do so, but not necessarily lock them in where it doesn't.
Catherine, and then Mark.
I would echo what Warner said in that is, I think if a student takes, if my program is going to require 2 semesters of organic and we'll let them take the first one at somewhere else, is we should also let them take the second one. And the way I see requiring the second semester of organic is, again, is if a student is transferring, it doesn't mean that they have to have had the course. They could always take it somewhere else if they needed it. That's true, but, you know, if a student has had that second semester of organic, I think we should, as a field, have to recognize that they've taken that second semester of organic, as opposed to having a school say, you know, nope, we're going to make you. And so that's why I think it should be included, is not so much, again, that everyone has to take it, but that everyone where it transfers and that does require it would have to accept that second semester.
Mark.
Yes, I have to agree with Catherine and with Warner. I think in terms of student success, I mean, this is really an articulation for the whole state. And for our students to take Organic 1 and then to be told wherever they go, sorry, your organic's just not up to snuff. You have to take organic. Even if they've taken Organic 2 with us, I'm sorry, you have to repeat that. That just seems to be flying in the face of 60 by 30. I would think that we would want to not have our students have to repeat things.
Yeah, in regards to Organic Chemistry 1 and 2, I would love to see us add those in there. It would be great. But I was thinking along the lines, from my understanding, we were just talking UT Austin will not accept either Organic Chemistry 1 or 2 as a transfer. And so I think that creates an issue that I thought that if we go with Organic Chemistry 1, then that allows the students to be able to either take it there, fulfill the requirements. They don't get too many hours in there. That's why I was thinking along those lines.
Okay, Sandra, and then Mark. Back to Mark.
Well, my first thought was that if what we're agreeing to is that this is a block of classes that would transfer, I don't think University of Texas gets to opt out of that. They would have to make some kind of an arrangement to accept. The other thing that I was thinking is that this is sort of a driver of the kind of faculty that community colleges would need to hire. And so if they were teaching physics and organic chemistry as a 2-semester sequence, it seems that would drive the hireability of those kind of faculty at community colleges and encourage them to have the higher quality faculty. If they're only going to teach 1 semester and not 2, then perhaps they wouldn't have the same quality of faculty being recruited. So it might be a recruiting factor. It might be a way of encouraging those qualified people to work in community colleges and teach these courses.
Okay, I'll go with Mark and then back to Gary, and then Percy.
It is my understanding, and this has been the case for a number of years, that University of Texas at Austin does not accept majors biology 1 and 2, much less organic 1 and 2. They don't accept anything. You have to come and take everything here. From community colleges, it's a closed door.
Gary, and then Percy.
Okay, the field of study statute applies equally to all public institutions of higher education across the state. And so once this committee does its work and we do the vetting process, and it goes to the board and a product is approved, it applies equally to everybody. And it doesn't apply to institution, it applies to students, is really and truly what it applies to. So speak to that. Then there's been conversations about staffing and hiring, and I want to go back to the statute. Each individual college's decision about who it hires, who it staffs, how many biology versus chemistry versus whatever is outside of our purview. And if you recall from the statute, it says if a student completes the entire field of study, it transfers. And so let's hypothetically use 30 hours. So if the field of study winds up being 30 and the student completes all 30, the student has 30 hours applied. We've discussed that. But then the second paragraph of statute says that if the student completes courses in the field of study, and I understand your comments about the sequencing and do 1 and 2 together and that kind of stuff, but hypothetically, if a community college doesn't do the college physics, as an example, is pulling something out of the box, and the student does all of the rest of the field of study, then it still applies. So staffing is not really, in play or not in play. That's a college's decision. Obviously, some of your bigger colleges can make more courses because they have more students, whereas some of the smaller colleges may not. So just want to put that out there.
In other words, if a college doesn't have the facilities to offer a organic chemistry, then that's not necessarily going to preclude the students who take those other courses from transferring those courses, and then they can take that organic chemistry where they go. Got it.
Right. If the organic chemistry 1 and 2 or 1 or whatever,
physics, or
yeah, it's still all of those and it more or less gives an opt-out both from a student point of view and a college point of view, if you will, of trying to make as much opportunity available as possible. And so it doesn't put a burden on the institution of once, I don't know, y'all are talking about genetics. I have no idea who all offers biology, genetics, or whatever the course is and who doesn't. But it doesn't put a burden on all the community colleges, an example of you got to start teaching this next semester. Nor does it put a burden of you got to teach this every semester. It's just, if it's in there and you package it, it's good to go. If not, and of course the same from a student point of view. Student life happens, all of a sudden they got to move from here to there, and they were going to do all 30 here, the made up number, and they had to move there and they only had 18. They still have 18.
Okay, Percy, and then I'd like to add something.
I just want to return to the common theme that I heard yesterday in the room, lean and mean. And we're creating more rigidity in chemistry for the universities across the state and leaving more flexibility in biology. So I would like to see the same for chemistry, allow the member institutions to have a little flexibility with their chemistry the same way we're allowing the flexibility with the biology. And I just want to get back to the lean and mean premise. Thank you.
Can I suggest that one thing that in sort of trying to unify comments, there's an ownership issue with the organic chemistry, it sounds like, right? That we're facing an ownership issue. And effectively, what we've done with taking one and not the other, or adding one and not the other, we've divided the baby, so to speak. And so, in fact, we've forced a communication, or we are encouraging a communication, not forced, but I think we're saying that if this course is going to be accepted, and this is part of the biology field of study, then there's a communication that's going to take place, or optimistically, perhaps on my part, that there would be, but I wouldn't be here if I wasn't optimistic about what the outcome could be. But in fact, if we gave one direction or the other, we might not be having that communication about what organic chemistry includes. We might be seeing students facing 2 courses not counting instead of just 1, or that kind of thing. So I'm just going to offer that that's perhaps what we've done, and that I would be very interested in hearing then from that division what the public comment might be from the institutions about that, the split ownership of that organic chemistry. Going to Larry.
Gary, So you're saying that UT, once we get this field of study, UT will be required to take not only the general biology, but all the chemistry that we put in it? I just want to make sure.
Yes, the field of study applies to all public institutions, and we, the coordinating board, get involved when students are adversely impacted and institutions are not complying with state law. And so if a student met the parameters that we're briefly discussing and they weren't applying the field of study, there would be reason for us to get involved. And
Warner, and then
just to your point about opening the communication. To me, it's a lot like sharing a car with your younger sister. If you're the parents, you really hope that it's going to work out great, and you're going to split it and it's going to be fine. You guys will work amongst yourselves. I have two younger sisters, and I can tell you that didn't happen for me. So I just think we should think about that if we're going to think about splitting it.
Sure. Other comments, or I'd like to call this vote again about organic. I'd like to take a break once we've kind of coalesced on a slate, and then have us marinate on that for a little while, and then come back and do our final votes. Does that sound like a good plan? So let's talk just about organic chemistry too. I'm sorry.
I have a question. As I'm sitting there and I'm listening to these comments go back and forth, because since we've got an equal split between the 2-year and the 4-year institutions, those of you in the 4-year institutions, from your perspective, if you had somebody transferring in that had that first course and not the second one, how would that work for you? I mean, I think that might provide some insight.
We'll go with Fred and then with Catherine.
It would transfer. I mean, he and I share students back and forth constantly. And if we got some mandate from above, which is what we're talking about here, that, Orgo 1 will count, y'all work it out for Orgo 2, we would make it work. And again, I realize that we're having a lot of transfers, not just because we're so isolated geographically that we do business with each other almost exclusively. But I see a lot of these other transfers that come in that are the university is not automatically accepting, and then they get bounced to me as chair to make a decision. And if I see a case of, well, the first half is accepted, but this isn't, I'd be like, well, why not? And sure, sign off on it. So at least from my perspective, if you have a reasonable institution who is truly interested in student success, it's a non-issue.
Okay, Catherine.
I think the same is true, at least with the biology. If we saw a student come in with one organic that automatically transferred and they had a second organic, we would accept that also. But what I would like to see, and why I want organic 2 included, is because I would, in fact, for instance, and not to pick on UT because Austin, because no one's here from there, but if that's the case, is I would like to see all schools be required to accept organic 2 if they're going to require it. And the reason also, Percy has mentioned that, we're putting more in chemistry, and that's because I think that's okay because chemistry is foundational. And so, and we're not, once students complete organic, we're not going to ask them in their biology major to continue to build on that. So I think, just a good foundation in the chemistries is okay. And so it's not so much ownership of the flavors of types of organic, where biology is more flavors. But that's why I'd like to see us include organic too, is because I want to see it transfer everywhere.
Okay, Larry, and then I'm going to call the vote after that.
One of the other reasons that I'm voting against it is our BA does not require organic chemistry 2. And I was wondering if anybody else who has a BA, what their requirements are.
I don't think we require organic 2.
Just one quick question for the bachelor's in biology. After organic, how many of you require biochem? Because organic will still play some role in the advancement for biochem.
I can, with the BA, a number of our students actually transfer into that program, and I would suggest that those students are still, it kind of becomes an advising issue. They're still not going to take that organic too, but if you had somebody who did, it seems to me like that would fit in. Would it fit in an elective somewhere?
Yeah, it fit in the elective. I was wondering overall, if those who have BAs, do they require organic chemistry?
Got it.
If we could get a hands on.
You don't?
Can you call for a hand?
Yeah, so those of the 4 institutions, for their BA, does it require organic chemistry? If it does, please raise your hand.
Doesn't require it?
If it does.
It does.
Organic chemistry 1.
Organic chemistry 2. For those who have a BA program, does it, who does not require organic 2? So we're split. All right, I'd like to call the vote on just simply the addition of organic chemistry to the biology field of study, okay? So all those in favor of adding organic chemistry 2 to the biology field of study, please raise your hand.
The number?
10?
Yeah.
All those opposed to adding organic chemistry 2 to the biology field of study? Okay.
Wow, that was close.
That was a close vote. So I think.
I demand a recount.
Obviously, we didn't have our off-site people, but. So let me just read out what we have for the biology field of study as it stands right now, okay? We have biology 1406 and the various permutations of that for the lab. Biology 1407, and again, the lab. Chemistry 1411, general chemistry 1. Chemistry 1412, general chemistry 2. Chemistry 2423, organic chemistry 1. And physics 1401, college physics. Should I read it one more time? Are we good? So that's our slate right now. That constitutes 24 credits. Of those credits, 6 would be included in the core under life physical science. So that would leave our biology field of study at 18 credits.
Yeah. Also, you can put the, if we're talking about putting things over into the core, there's those experiential learning things, which you can use the labs for those.
Okay.
So we could put potentially 8 credits in the core.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, since a break has been called for, I think everybody probably needs one right now, have that in your head for the next 10 minutes for a quick break, if that's all right. And then we'll come back, and then at that point, we will, I think, have a quick discussion. Then I'd like to take a vote if everybody's comfortable with that, okay? So I may take a vote on taking a vote, which sounds weird, but I think it's reasonable to ask that at this point in time, okay? So we're taking a quick break.
Don't want any of those.
about those.
But then it kind of gives you a sense that you and your 4-year school form a really intimate relationship.
To be back. So once she's returned, we're going to I'd like to explain where the vote's going to go, at least the process of the vote, not where your vote is going to go. I'd like to hold 2 votes. The first vote I'm going to call for is a vote to proceed to our final vote. I know it seems redundant, but what I don't want is that final vote to be failed because we still had items to discuss. So this first vote will be a vote in favor of moving forward to the final vote on the FOS. A vote opposed means that you still have items you want to discuss that we haven't yet talked about. Okay, so that's the first vote. And I'll review again before we go to either vote the status of the field of study. Larry, yes.
Can we have it's like an open discussion prior to that first vote?
I'd like to have the first vote first, and then if there's any remaining items, for those to come up at that time.
Okay.
Okay. And then we'll have the final vote on the FOS, just because we need to have that as our official determination as a committee for that FOS now to move forward to public comment. After we finish that vote, then we'll have some discussion about some additional items, the next steps, and some other general concerns. So if it's not something that directly influenced our slate of issues, but it's something you'd like to raise at that point after our final vote for the FOS, then we'll talk about those things. These are things that we might have to keep in mind as co-chairs, or things that the coordinating board will have to keep in mind as it goes for public comment, lots of other things. So we'll have a chance for you to raise more issues. But I want to get our clean votes first, or our straightforward votes initially, and then go into more discussion at the end. Okay? Does that sound, just a thumbs up if you're good with that? So all those in favor? Let me go back. The biology field of study as it stands right now, just to remind us, before the break I said it's biology 1406, biology 1407, chemistry 1411, chemistry 1412, chemistry 2423, and physics 1401.
And the 3-to-1.
Yes, the 3-to-1 options still are implicit in the 2 biologies and the chemistries. So those total 24 credits, and of those 6, perhaps more could count for a core. but that puts us at minimally a 18-hour field of study. Okay? So all those in favor of proceeding to our final vote on that slate, please raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed, just in case. All right, so we've voted to move forward on that vote for the biology field of study. Okay, so with that, I'd like to call the vote to say all those in favor of, as described, the biology field of study, the 24 credits of courses, all those in favor of the biology field of study that we've hammered out in the last 2 days, please raise your hand. I just want to say thank you so much we've gotten a long way in the last, not even 2 days, it's in a short amount of time. So I appreciate seeing all those hands go in the air means that I hope that in spite of our particular concerns that we have, which are important, I'm not trying to eliminate them. But that being said, I appreciate that we've kind of seen the big picture and we're going to now work to the next steps.
Amanda, you can add Sherry McCullough's vote as well to the votes to approve the field of study. Yes. Excuse me.
Because we voted twice, so.
Oh, to both votes, yeah. This is a great field of study. I think it's really effective. I appreciate your unanimity. I think it does a good job. It keeps it to 18 hours minus the core classes, which means students could graduate with an associate degree if for some reason they don't complete the degree as a junior or senior, which contributes to our 60 by 30 goals of students completing a degree, which is wonderful. So I appreciate you doing that. I think this field of study covers the ground that it needs to cover for all biology majors, both BA and BS majors, without being too excessive, without putting an excessive burden on students or institutions. I think you've kept an eye on which courses are offered often, so we're not creating a burden on institutions to start offering more sections of a course that they're not staffed for. So I think this really hits all the bases. I think you all did a really, really fine job, so my thanks to all of you.
So the next steps that we have, this will go now to public comment. So we'll have the minutes of this meeting that the three of us will go through and look over, and this will go to public comment. And so in terms of categorizing our feedback, the first thing is that are any items that you're, as we receive public comment, that you'd like us to keep an eye on, or things that you may have some concerns about? So Larry, we'll start.
Yes. Obviously, I need to go back to my institution, talk to my faculty. And so what I'm thinking along the lines of is, since this is in the field of study, we do not have the physics in our BA. From my understanding, we're supposed to go back now and put it into our BA, right? Or, I just want to clarify, that's why I want to clarify. So we're not required to put it in our BA. However, if a student transfers in and wants to do BA, then we have to incorporate that as an elective, the physics, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
And, Larry, I think you've kind of talked about your BA versus BS, and I think, as I said earlier, a bit of the teaching versus the biology major. If a student completes all the courses as discussed and then transfers to U of H Clear Lake, I wonder if the BS isn't the best fit and really and truly where the student's probably going. But then if it is, as approved, then, I would think the answer to your question is yes. You've got to deal with that student. You've got to find a place for that course. But I think, as Jim has pointed out a couple of times, it seems like there's some advising in here, because I'm not real sure those students are going to always be those students.
Any other, Warner?
Just to get back to your question of public comments and what we should look for, I think it would be, excuse me, of interest for the organic chemistry comments about how we've split it here and what others feel about that.
And probably, I think we probably find some agreement on that, some concerns. Any other things that we should watch out for in the public comment that you're concerned about? Yeah, Uma, and then Bridget. Okay.
I think I spoke to you during the break about the credit transfers. So 1306 or 1406 is a total of 4 credit hours with lab, and the way it would transfer to us is we have 4 credit hours just of the lecture, and we have 3 credit hours of the lab. And then there might be some concern about how exactly that transfer is going to happen. Do they still have to take the lab at our institution, even though they've taken the lab earlier? So that's something that would be of big concern to students transferring into UTD.
And I think I mentioned when we talked, that situation seems really unusual to me, that's 7 credits in Introductory Biology 1. And I don't know if anybody else has that situation.
It's an introductory lab that's a 3 credit hour, that's a separate course that follows after you take Introductory Bio 1 the first semester. So you don't take it at the same time. We have to do the lab. So the lecture course is a prerequisite for the lab.
Okay. And that sounds a different situation. I'd be interested in just hearing when you go back to your institution what their response is, because I can't say for sure what.
No, I'm just saying to look out for.
To look out for that. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Bridget, and then Frederick.
The second semester transfer courses of what others think that might should be, or if there should be one or not.
Okay. Frederick?
Yeah, the difference in numbers of how things are transferred in tends to be a local issue. For example, my institution has great difficulty with accepting the credits from a 4-hour lecture lab combo, and I'm being very specific here. And they'll put it in as, well, you just got 3 credits for a lecture and not the lab, and then there's additional paperwork at my end to fix it. So that might be something with your transfer department.
Right.
Through the public, comments, I think you kind of touched base with this one about adding, or on the lookout for adding a sophomore kind of type of course, to this one.
Okay. Any other? Yeah, Sandra.
Mary and I were talking about one of the documents that you put on the web for us to look at, which is this academic course guide manual. Did I put that properly? And I understand that in colleges, community colleges, that this is adhered to carefully and that they use this as a guideline to plan their courses and their course sequences. I think in four-year institutions, not so much. And that's where the mismatch is coming in, is that we're not receiving the same instructions or instructions as directives. And I think most of us are not opposed to this, but either we haven't been exposed to it or we haven't been asked to adhere to it. So whether that's a mandate or that's a suggestion is a question that I have. And if it were maybe better publicized and explained to people in both institutions, we'd get better articulation of coursework.
And I, just to say how I think I'm going to handle it at my own institution, just as an example, and speaking that, I have meetings with other deans, we know that field of study is going to all disciplines, all programs. And so I think that as deans, I'd like to raise this as an item for our Deans Council to discuss. And I think that might be a suggestion that you have at your institutions, not to tell your Deans Council what to do, but to certainly suggest that this is an item that's coming down and that it affects the practical day-to-day operations of your departments and programs. And then I'm taking this to my biology program and talking to them about it, because I think we still have some things to work out. So the conversations that are going to happen, I think, are going to be very valuable, and they're ones that I agree with you that maybe that we haven't had appropriately or to the length that we need to in some areas to be able to, we think we each know what we're all doing, but it seems like we're probably in, our alignment is needed, and that's really what this whole process is all about.
Sandra articulates very well a long-standing concern that we've had at the coordinating board. One of our great priorities is to try hard through our various committees, one of which is the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee, UEAC, which your institutions may have representatives to. If not, I encourage you to start sending representatives to the UEAC, where we are trying to get much more communication between the 4-year and the 2-year institutions so that they're all on the same page about many of these courses. All too often, 4-year institutions will put together a degree plan without barely even stopping to think about what is going on at the college level, what is going to help students when they're transferring not only from 2-year to 4-year institutions, but across 4-year institutions. So we very much encourage 4-year institutions to start taking a look at the courses that are in the ACGM, because that's the master list of courses that are guaranteed to transfer from institution to institution to institution. And keeping that in mind before you develop your own courses that are similar but not exactly the same as the courses that are in the ACGM, you're doing your transfer students a favor if you can get your courses to at least be mapped to the courses that are in the ACGM. So even if you're not offering the same course with the same title at the undergraduate, at the lower division level, at least you've got a course that's similar enough in content that you could map to it and give that student credit when they come in to transfer. So I very much echo Sandra's comments and hope that you keep that in mind. As we develop more fields of study and as years go by, there will be a field of study for virtually every major in Texas, all of them. We're starting with the ones that have the highest number of transfer students, but as we get down the list, we'll start working for those programs that receive fewer transfer students. We're hoping that this process of having committees come together to talk about fields of study, and as institutions start implementing fields of study, that much more attention, careful attention, will be paid at 4-year institutions to putting together degree plans that incorporate the field of study from the ground up. And at the very minimum, start paying more careful attention to the needs of transfer students. Because as you all know, as tuition costs rise and as student debt rises, students are doing more and more of their undergraduate coursework at the much more affordable community colleges. And so we're encouraging articulation agreements, transfer agreements, field of study agreements to do everything we can to help those students have ease and success of transfer as much as we possibly can.
Okay, so any other things to add to the list of watching for public comment? Because I'm going to move on to a couple more things. All right, the next thing to ask you for is if you could vote. This vote will be to authorize the three of us to finalize the minutes without us having to have a meeting to discuss the minutes. We can't have an email vote. So would all those in favor of allowing us to finalize the minutes, and then
I'll send a draft of the minutes to all of you for your comment, and then I'll incorporate your comments into a final draft, which I'll send to all of you. But in terms of an official final vote, if you could authorize your chairs to vote for the final approval, then that'll save us some logistical problems with having to comply with public meeting law.
Okay, so all those in favor of allowing us to do that, to finalize the minutes, raise your hand. Okay, I was opposed as none, I think. And then the next request is to ask you that after the public comment, so we will all have access to that information, and the question would be after the public comment to vote to authorize the chairs, unless there is a major issue that requires us to reconvene, to authorize the chairs to move forward with the final version of the FOS based on that public comment. So it doesn't mean that you won't see that. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to incorporate it, or not incorporate it, but it does mean that you'd authorize us to, without a meeting, unless there's a major concern. So all those in favor of allowing us to do that? Okay.
We'll have to see as the public comments come in if the chairs and if the coordinating board administration feel that a second in-person meeting is necessary. We have three options. One, if there's not that many public comments, then you've authorized the chairs to move forward with the field of study. If there's a fair number of them that need some discussion, we could perhaps have a teleconference, which does comply with public meeting law. Or if there's a lot of public comments and there's some real contentious issues, we reserve the right at the chair's discretion and the coordinating board administration to call you all back to Austin for another one of these meetings. So we'll just have to see as the public comments get in. Rest assured that every one of you will get a copy of every public comment, and you'll have an opportunity to send me your feedback of which ones you believe to incorporate and why, and then based on that, we'll move forward with the advice of the chairs on how to proceed.
Okay, Frederick, you had a comment.
Just out of curiosity, is the public very active in matters like this, or do they just sort of ignore it?
Rex or Gary, from your experience, do you want to speak to that?
Well, the public at large, no, but the rest of you, all your colleagues and peers, but it varies greatly, and we'll just, almost as Alan has said, we'll just have to see what happens, and I think as I said, and I think we've explained, it's transparency. We're just really trying to put it out there, and if somebody has an opinion or an observation of something that we didn't consider, it probably needs to be vetted and reviewed. Generally, the comments are very non-substantive, I guess, but let's see what kind of level of we get, and we'll go from there. But as Alan said, we'll share it with y'all, and more than anything else, if the comments are like, wow, y'all did good work, it's kind of pointless to bring y'all all back to Austin and say, hey, we got 27 people that said y'all did good work, and you want to do one more vote and then leave. So that's what we're trying to minimize.
Sandra.
My last question was, how much should we talk about this when we get back home? Sometimes we're asked to sort of keep a low profile and don't stir things up, or other times it's great to go back and share with what we've seen, done, heard. What were our controversies or questions? Well, maybe we're supposed to present a united front as a group rather than to go back and say, well, we didn't all agree, and here's what we didn't agree on. I'm not sure how much you wanted that to happen.
I think Gary got to it when he was talking. I think Gary got to it when he was talking about transparency. I mean, I think you should be transparent, and I don't think there's anything here that should be in any way kept back. I mean, I think the discussions we had were, they had merit, they were collegial, and they represented they allowed for input from a wide array of different experiences, and I think there's value to bringing those back to your institution if there's interest.
And one more brief comment, and Rex, if you want to say something. Psychology, that committee's already formed. Alan, do we still have nominations out for a group, or have we closed those?
No, we don't have any current nominations out.
But the tide is, maybe I shouldn't use that after the football game last night. I was going to say the tide is rolling. I was really hoping Georgia would win myself, but there are more disciplines coming. So, share amongst your colleagues in the biology department, but then really there's more coming. It's across the institution.
I mean, it's an interesting comment, because if this were a negotiated rulemaking committee and I don't know that any of you have ever served on a negotiated rulemaking committee at the coordinating board, but we use the negotiated rulemaking from time to time. And if it was a negotiated rulemaking committee, then you would be bound by the agreement that you reached. And you would actually be directed and asked not to go stir things up. And if asked about it, to present a united front in that sense. But this is not a negotiated rulemaking committee. This is more of a traditional advisory committee. And so in that sense, then you actually should go back and talk about it. On the other hand, I mean, it is a committee that was designed to try to reach some consensus on things. So, but dissent is not always a bad thing. it is sometimes a good thing, and some of that then can be worked out in the public comment process itself. But yeah, you should go back and feel free to discuss what you've done here with your colleagues, with both at your institution and at other institutions as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have Warner and we have Amanda. Good.
Just to clarify, I understand the meeting is recorded. So is the meeting recording available to the public, including anybody in our institute
That's
can
right,
listen
it
to?
is. It'll be archived on YouTube. All you have to do is search for this committee title on YouTube, and it's there for the entire planet to see for eternity. So yes, you can pretend our conversation didn't exist if you like, but the public record's out there. Also, our minutes, which will contain the substance of our topics we discussed, will also be posted on the coordinating board webpage for this committee. So no, of course, we're very much trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. I encourage you to use your position as a member of the committee to be a sort of evangelist for the field of study for biology, to encourage your colleagues at your own institutions, of course, but also at other institutions with which you have transfer agreements. To talk to your transfer agreement partners about adopting the field of study, encouraging them to get on board with this and to do what they can to ease transfer. If you are going to any conferences, or if you're a member of a listserv or something for our group, for Texas biology instructors, I encourage you to have them watch out for the call for public comment, and feel free to pass along my email address if you like, and I'll make sure that their public comments get recorded. And anything you can do to help promote the field of study is very much appreciated by us.
Okay, Mark, and then Manish.
I think it
sorry.
would be a really good idea. I'm going to certainly encourage it at Texarkana College for us to have a certificate of some sort or some sort of credential that's added for the student when they complete the field of study for biology, and have that as something to hold out for the student and give them that extra sense of moving forward, and you've
That's
completed.
excellent. The field of study, remember, also has to be noted on student transcripts. So insofar as it's on their transcript, there could be some other kind of certification that your institution wants to award them. That would be a great idea.
Field of study are already recognized as an academic certificate, so yeah, feel free to do exactly that.
And I'm sorry, I skipped Warner earlier, so Manish, can I go with Warner first and then?
Just a quick logistical question. When does the 30-day comment period kind of open? And how, is there going to be a website that people can go to make comments? Is there a certain email address? What kind of time frame do we have to drum up this kind of review?
Do you want to speak to that, or do you want?
So I'll speak to it if you want.
Can you state your name? I'm sorry, not everybody is aware of who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Rex Peebles. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce.
Gotcha. Thank
So
you.
when Alan talks about the administration at the coordinating board, he primarily means me. So
I'm sorry if I didn't introduce Rex. I apologize, Rex.
Yeah. So the 30-day comment period will begin the day after we send the email out, and that'll occur in the next few days. It's just a question of pulling all that together and getting it in a proper format. And in that email, there is there's an email there that directs you to send the comments either to a comment box, or I think it also says you can send them directly to me, in which case I just forward them into the comment box, and then they're all collected, and then at the end of the 30 days, we will pull them out and then take a look at them and see what we've got, if there's any, as Alan pointed out already, if there's anything of substance in there or anything that looks like it might be of substance, then we'll bring it back to the committee. So we try to err on the side of caution on that end and get back to the committee pretty much whatever's there. And actually, you'll see a full range of the comments anyway, good, bad, or indifferent. And it really does depend on how this strikes people in the field. Sometimes we get a lot, sometimes we get very little.
Okay, Manish, and then Debbie. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry,
And then,
I had the same question on public comment.
oh, okay. Yeah. All right, Debbie, and then Amanda.
Are those going to just go to the vice president or the VP of instruction, or, because I know generally I don't get anything unless it's forwarded from the VP.
We can't solve your internal problems.
Sorry.
I wish we could, and having been at institutions for 25 plus years, I understand exactly what you're talking about. And having been a VP once who forwarded most everything I got, but certainly stuff fell through the cracks. So this will go to presidents, chancellors, CAOs, CIOs, but it will also go to all the liaisons for the community colleges, and we now have liaisons for 4 institutions as well. And their job is to direct it to the appropriate place. And typically, I mean, I think generally they do a pretty good job of that. So, yeah, I mean, it's just difficult. And of course, I think when we send it out, you all will get notified that it's also gone out too. So we'll also notify the committee, so at least y'all will know that it's out there, and then you could help spread the word from there. So.
To follow up on Rex, the emails will be sending to all the president, chancellor, and so on and so forth, and also to us as well. Is it kosher for us to also kind of spread the word, or we have to wait until our upper echelon to send it on before we start talking about this? So will we be stepping on someone's toes if we start kind of broadcasting this and get into discussion as soon as we can?
Well, you might be stepping on the toes of somebody at your institution if they are inclined to take it that way. You won't be stepping on my toes at all, so, yeah.
Okay, Uma.
This is more of a clarification from the four-year institution. So we are saying that we have 24 credit hours here as a field of study.
Yes.
And we can take any 6 of those?
6 of those
towards
could apply
score.
toward the core, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
6 or more, right? 6 more. Yeah, 6 or more has been pointed out, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, before we adjourn, I'd like to, I guess, Jim, you want to say a couple things?
Oh, yeah. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I think this was a very collegial discussion. I think we got a lot done in a very short period of time, and it went very well. And that is, I think, a testament to your working together and kind of maintaining that air. I want to say also thank you to Marcy, who did an outstanding job leading our discussions, and also to Amanda, who did kept copious notes. I don't know if you saw her writing over here so quickly.
I haven't seen my minutes.
So anyway, I wanted to make those comments.
Ellen, anything? Is there anything you'd like to say at the end?
No, thank you very much, and I'll see a third of you again in 5 years.
So,
Yeah, I too just like to thank you all for the time and effort that you put into this. I got to listen to a little bit of this from time to time since it's broadcast, and I can also pick up in my office, and so I got to listen to a little bit of discussion. And I've seen several of these, and this was marked by a lot of civility and
well, and
have to try harder.
but also really good dialogue and discussion about the issues.
And credit to Alan and
important.
Gary, who gave us a lot of pertinent and timely insight as we move forward.
Good.
If you could leave your expense reports with me before you go, unless you want to take it home with you to record your expenses for your return trip, in which case feel free to email it to me later. You can scan it and email it to me. But if you have it ready or just want to estimate your return expenses, you can leave your expense report here with me on the side table there before you leave. That'd be appreciated.
You want us to put our name on the expense?
Oh, yes, please, so I can keep track of which ones I've already received. It's not an official document, and it doesn't have to be to the penny. It's just an estimate that we need to provide to the board every year about what these committees are costing the taxpayers, so I do appreciate it.
All right, with that, I think we are adjourned. You're like the kids at the end of my classes, so you're packing up your stuff ready to go. So have safe travels, and we'll see you all, some of you in 5 years. Hopefully not sooner, or hopefully sooner in a better context. I do what? You're retiring? Thank you all. Yeah, we'll have to give you my